Today at this time, we'll be learning about the 12 tribes of Israel, and this time we'll be focusing on the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh. So right now we're examining and referring to Reverend Abraham Park's Sermon of the 12 Tribes, which he gave during Wednesday services from August 29th through November 2nd of 1994. And so we'll be examining the tribe of Manasseh from these perspectives. We'll first look at the background of one's birth, Jacob's blessing for Manasseh in Genesis 49, Moses' blessing for Manasseh in Deuteronomy 33, and the 12 stones of the high priest's breastpiece that symbolizes Manasseh, and the redemptive historical lesson. And so we'll be examining these things for Manasseh. So here is the map, and this is the land that was allotted to each tribe, and we see Manasseh is here right in the center in the color yellow. Manasseh. Let's first examine the background of Manasseh's birth. So Manasseh was the firstborn son born to Joseph while he was in Egypt. So he was the firstborn son born to Joseph while he was in Egypt. Genesis 41, 46 to 47. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. As we know Joseph, he was sold by his brothers. Like he was schemed against by his brothers because they were so envious of him. And as a result, he was sold to Egypt by his brothers. And so he was a servant in Egypt. And then he was framed unfairly and then jailed, locked up. But then by God's amazing providence, he was able to then become the second most powerful person in the nation of Egypt. He was like a prime minister, second in power only after Pharaoh. And this is truly by the grace of God. And so that was when Joseph was 30 years old. And so it says, Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. Then verse 50 and 51. Now before the year of famine became, 2 sons were born to Joseph, from whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. So before the famine came, he had 2 sons in Egypt. So Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. So God made me forget. Manasseh. And so he's the firstborn son of Joseph. And who is Joseph? Joseph is the son of Jacob. And so the 12 tribes of Jacob, right? The 12 tribes of Israel is from the 12 sons of Israel, right? However, shockingly, Manasseh, and we will learn next time, Ephraim, these 2 tribes, or if you were to look really carefully, they're actually grandchildren of Jacob, not sons. They're sons of Joseph. But God, he did not make a tribe of Joseph. No, instead of tribe of Joseph, he made 2 separate tribes, which is Manasseh and Ephraim. And so they make up 2 of the tribes out of 12. So Manasseh means causing to forget. When we look in verse 51, Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget. Forget what? All my trouble and all my father's household. So I forgot all about my father's household. All my troubles. To Joseph, what does this include? by the grace of God and from Jacob, he received such love from his father and he grew up. But he was sold by his brothers after having been schemed against, right? And he was sold to Egypt. All that suffering, all that hardship, God allowed him to forget. And so, in the past, the things that we need to forget, in order to progress forward, if there are things that block your way, you want to forget, but you can't. But God, in the case of Joseph, God allowed him to forget. God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The past that you need to forget, God allows you to forget. So God makes us also forget what we need to forget. So Manasseh, that's the name of the firstborn, causing to forget. Second, blessing begins when we learn to forget the painful past. So blessing begins when we learn to forget the painful past. Then there can be progress. Genesis 41, 51 to 52. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And he named the second Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And so as a forgetting of the painful past, then that next, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So after forgetting, then Ephraim, fruitfulness, great prosperity. That's the meaning of Ephraim. And so after forgetting that painful past, next step, fruitfulness, great prosperity. So the pain and the suffering that Joseph experienced. And then we see the blessing that he has obtained afterwards with the name of the second son. So we need to receive the blessing of Manasseh, of forgetfully, of learning to forget, so that we can then receive the next blessing, fruitfulness, great prosperity. But if you're not able to forget the past, I want to take revenge. If that's the human thought, you think it's right. And you think that you will feel refreshed after taking revenge. But God's amazing providence is allowing you to forget so that you can obtain the next fruitfulness, great prosperity that will follow afterwards. So on October 12, 1994, Reverend Abraham Park stated, blessing begins when we learn to forget the past. If a person remains bound by past hardships, adversities, resentments, and failures, he can never move forward. Only those who leave the past behind can embark on a new journey towards the future and venture into new territories. Third, after the birth of Manasseh, Joseph put forgiveness into practice. In Genesis 45, verses 4 to 5, as we have examined in verse 40, so during the first 7 years, Joseph had the two sons, Manasseh, Ephraim. And then Manasseh, meaning God caused him to forget all about his past, right? And then he really then put that forgiveness into practice after the birth, because now it's famine. After the 7 years of abundance, then the 7 years of famine. And only Egypt, where Joseph is at, there's food. Because he interpreted the dream of Pharaoh. There was abundance and there is famine. There are 7 years of plentifulness, 7 years of famine. He knew. So that's why he planned in advance to gather all the food in the first 7 years, the first half, so that he's prepared for the second half. But the neighboring nations did not prepare because they did not know about the upcoming famine. And so when it's famine and there's no more food, and they're gathering from nearby nations for food. And so they all came to Egypt for food, and so did Joseph's brothers. At first, Joseph hid his identity from his brothers. And the brothers, and he must have felt so conflicted seeing his brothers. But his own son's name is Manasseh. When Joseph saw his brother's face, then he will remember the name of his son Manasseh. God caused me to forget so I can progress forward, move forward. And now in verses 4-5, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. So God sent me before you to preserve life. And so he put forgiveness into practice. You sold me. That's a fact. However, all this is all part of God's plan of redemption, his plan of salvation. And so he forgave his brothers. Manasseh caused to forget, with this blessing of forgetting the past. And so now he forgives. And we see this in Genesis 45. Forgiveness. It means choosing to forget. Choosing to forget. Forgiveness. So in Genesis 50 verse 20, when his father Jacob died, before the father's alive, so the brothers felt, safer. But now, because of the father, he's leaving us alone. He's not harming us. But now father died, and so they're scared. Is Joseph now going to take revenge against us for what we done? So they're kind of begging, trying to have their life preserved. And what did Joseph say to his brothers in 50 verse 20? And as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So human perspective. Yes, my heart is upset. So unfair, painful. I've suffered so. It was a horrible experience, but this was all part of God's good work. In order to save many people, he has used me. So Joseph always thought about Manasseh, forgetting, living a life of forgiveness, and moving forward. And so this is a kind of forgiveness that is impossible without the grace of the living God. This is only possible through the grace of living God. So the blessing of forgetfulness, that's only possible when God makes us forget. In the middle of the sermon, Reverend Abraham Park stated, when we examine Joseph's life through scripture, we find no record of him complaining, even though he suffered at the hands of his brothers and was treated unjustly by many people. This is because Joseph interpreted all of his life experiences through the lens of God's victory and sovereign purpose. Do you believe that not even a single sparrow can fall to the ground apart from God's will? Please write down and read Matthew 10:29-30. You should believe that without God's permission, no one can harm you or even touch a single hair on your head. Matthew 10:29-30. What does it say? Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent? And yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So without God's permission, nothing can be done. So Joseph, all that happened to Joseph, all the unfair things, it was all part of God's plan. And that's how he got fulfilled his salvation. And so Joseph was very confident of this being God's providence. Being number 2, let's now look at Jacob's prophecy concerning Manasseh. Until now, it was all those prophecies were recorded in Genesis 49, but for Manasseh is 48, verses 15 to 20. And Jacob blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the face of the earth." Verse 17. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he grabs his father's hand to remove it to Ephraim's head, to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations." And he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel shall pronounce blessing, saying, May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. So Joseph wanted his father Jacob to place his right hand on the firstborn, Manasseh. And so he tells his father Jacob. And so this is when he's introducing his grandson to Jacob, right? Both his grandchildren, Manasseh and Ephraim. "Oh, these are my sons. Who are they? These are the sons I had in Egypt." So we learned about Joseph. As he's blessing Joseph, he's also blessing Manasseh and Ephraim. But the order is Manasseh's first. So he's the firstborn. Ephraim is the secondborn. Then you need to give the blessing of the right hand to the firstborn. And so Jacob should be placing his right hand on the firstborn, Manasseh's head. And the left hand should be on Ephraim, the secondborn. But he's actually did opposite. And Joseph, when he saw this, "Father, that's wrong. Order. He's the older one." But Jacob says, I know, my son. Yes, Manasseh will become great, but Ephraim will become greater. And so he places the younger, the secondborn, ahead of the firstborn. So then Ephraim becomes the firstborn. He places Ephraim into the firstborn instead of Manasseh. And so this is the scene where he blesses them. So the blessing scene in Genesis 48 reminds us of the account of Jacob and Esau. Because all of a sudden, the firstborn and secondborn, their positions are switched. And that reminds us to Jacob and Esau. As we know in Genesis 27, 30 to 31, Jacob and Esau, they're twins. But who's the older brother? Esau. The younger brother is Jacob. But Isaac blesses Jacob and Esau, and he wants to bless Esau because he's the firstborn. But Rebekah catches on, and she sends her beloved son Jacob, "Quickly go. I will cook for you. When I bring the food, go to your father. And take that blessing of the firstborn from your father." And so Jacob goes. And Isaac blesses him as a firstborn. And it says in 30 to 31, "Now it came about as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had hardly gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting." So this is the blessing of the firstborn that he received. "Then he also made savory food and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." So he wants the firstborn blessing. But then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling. He's like, I already blessed your younger brother. The blessing's all gone. How can you do that? And he begged and clung to him. Bless me too, bless me too. And so he says, behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of heaven from above. And by your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve. But it shall come about when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. So Esau does not receive the blessing of the firstborn, because the blessing of the firstborn has gone to gone to Jacob from Isaac. What, did this just happen out of nowhere? No. Because previously in Genesis 25, Esau sold his birthright for like lentil stew, like a bowl of stew. Jacob said, first swear to me. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So in Genesis 25, he sold his birthright to Jacob for bread and lentil stew, just because he was starving. And so he considered the birthright really lightly. He despised it. And that's why he missed out on this blessing of the firstborn, because he despised his birthright. But Manasseh, did he make a mistake like Esau? Now, however, nowhere in scripture is there any indication that Manasseh made a mistake that would have caused him to lose the rights and inheritance of the firstborn as Esau did. What did I do wrong? Aren't I the firstborn? He could have said that. But everyone was shockingly. But God says. So it does bring mind to Esau and Jacob, but actually it's not the same case. Because Manasseh and Ephraim, they both received blessings. They really both received blessings. Manasseh received a great blessing. In Genesis 48:19, but his father Jacob refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. And so the right hand went to Ephraim, and the left hand went to Manasseh's head. And so he also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. So he also received a great blessing. But the younger brother, Ephraim, will just become greater. He just will be greater. So they both received great blessings. But Ephraim just received greater and just places him higher. So through the cases of Manasseh and Ephraim, we come to understand God's principle in choosing and using people. So why did this happen like this? We might become curious. Well, God uses people according to his own will and purpose. So God uses people according to his own will and purpose. I'm going to use this person this way. I'm going to use that person that way. If God chooses to use someone else instead of me, we cannot say that God is unfair. Why is God not using me? How can you do that, God? You cannot say that God is unjust or unfair just for not choosing you. So at this moment, according to God's will and purpose, he has a choice to not use me, or he has a choice to use me. That judgment is all on God. And you can't say, why did you do that? Likewise, when God chooses to use me, we must not think that he has cursed others. You guys haven't been used by God. Oh, you can't put others down. You can't curse others just because he uses you. Like maybe like Esau, you despise the birthright. and the blessings cut off from him as a result. But today's scripture, though, Manasseh and Ephraim. But none of that happened. They were both blessed. You can't just say God only blessed Ephraim. What's the point of Manasseh being born as the firstborn? He's cursed. You can't say that. You can't say that. So therefore, instead of comparing ourselves with others, we should be thankful for the blessings God has given us and do our very best in the work He has entrusted to us. And this is how that we will be used for God's purpose for God's joy, right? Let's examine Moses' blessing concerning Manasseh. Deuteronomy 33:16-17. And with the choice things of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush, let it come to the head of Joseph, and to the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So since it's a blessing for Joseph, it's then to the two sons of Joseph. And the firstborn of his ox, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he shall push the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth. And those are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and those are the thousands of Manasseh. But we know that the order of birth, Manasseh is first. But here we see in the blessing of Moses. So remember, with Jacob blessing them, it was Ephraim first, then Manasseh, right? But then also in Moses' blessing, those are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and those are the thousands of Manasseh. So we see Ephraim being blessed first. Why is my younger brother 10,000s? Why only I am thousands? You may think. But there is no complaining there. Manasseh did not complain about the blessing he received. Instead, he was thankful for it. There is no evidence in the Bible of any complaints. On October 12, 1994, it says, an important fact is that Manasseh did not complain because he thought he had received less blessing. He did not envy others. He was not jealous of them, nor did he speak against them behind their backs. Because of this, Manasseh was able to grow and prosper through the blessings that God had given him. If at that moment, Manasseh, am I only thousands and my younger brother is 10,000s? How can this be? And so every day you're just so focused on that and it's filled with jealousy, envy, and you want to put the other down. If that was the mentality at that time, then they would not have grown or prospered, right? However, he didn't do that. So as a result, what happened? Manasseh lived a life of progress and growth under God's blessing because he was just thankful. There was no complaint. So that's why he lived a life of progress and growth under God's blessing. First, he received the blessing of a vast territory. Deuteronomy 3:13. And the rest of Gilead and all Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh, all the region of Argob. So looking at the Jordan River right in the middle, the tribe of Manasseh received land on the left and land on the right, breaking the tribe in half. And so they have a vast territory. Joshua 17 verses 7-10. So the border of Manasseh ran from Asher to Mikmathah, which was east of Shechem. And so here we see the map. So this is the land allotted to the 12 tribes. And so here, this is the Jordan River in blue. Here's one half of Manasseh on the left side, on the west of the Jordan River. And then we have the half on the east of the Jordan River. So out of the 12, there's no other tribes that has such a vast territory to the west and to the east. Manasseh is the only tribe. Only Manasseh. So Manasseh. So God blessed him so much. He received the blessing of remarkable population growth. In Numbers 135, their numbered men of the tribe of Manasseh was 32,200. And then 40 years later, when they counted again, in the second census, right before they entered in, so the first census was right in the beginning of the wilderness journey. Second was right before entering the land of Canaan. These are the families of Manasseh, and those who were numbered of them were 52,700. And so we see a big increase in this population growth. And so that's 20,500 increase. That's about 64% growth. And so this was the greatest population growth amongst the 12 tribes. So this is the highest growth rate among the 12 tribes, about 64% growth. This is such a remarkable population growth, showing the blessing, the prosperity that this tribe received. Big number 4. Now let's look at the stone representing Manasseh. On the high priest, he wears a breastpiece of judgment, and there are 12 stones attached to this ephod. And then in the third row, in the very center, we see a gate. A gate. And here is the agate, Manasseh, on the third row. Agate, in Hebrew word, is shebo or shibo. Shibo. The characteristic is very strong and durable. It becomes more beautiful through refinement. And so it looks very sturdy and strong and durable. The more you refine it, it shines more, it becomes more beautiful. So what does this teach us? Our faith must also become strong and steadfast. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. So he was born as the firstborn. But his grandfather Jacob, swaps his hands. Oh, suddenly he became a secondborn. Would your faith be shaken? Yeah, that's a perfect reason to be shaken in his faith, right? What did I do wrong? Why am I now a secondborn? However, Manasseh's faith did not shake. He did not fall or stumble. No, he was strong and steadfast and durable, immovable. And so God blessed him even more. 1 Peter 1:7, that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So we need to have that faith that is steadfast, durable. That faith will become more beautiful as it is refined. Job 23:10, but he knows the way I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. And so the more we are refined, our faith becomes more beautiful. So in order for there to be a precious, beautiful gem, there needs to be refinement, right? You need to be purified. Malachi 3:3, and he will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may present to the Lord offerings in righteousness. So the Levi, they are those that work for worship. They devote themselves to God for the worship. They are the firstborn tribe. They take on the role of a firstborn for all the tribes, right? And that's the tribe of Levi. And God will purify the Levi, refine them like gold and silver. Such faith. So today's conclusion. Let's look at the redemptive historical lesson of Manasseh. When we stop comparing ourselves with others and remain thankful for the blessings we have received, faithfully fulfilling our responsibilities, God grants us the blessing of continued growth and progress. On October 12, 1994, Reverend Abraham Park stated, Scripture remains silent as to why the portion that might have been expected for Manasseh was given to Ephraim instead. Yet Manasseh did not question God's decision and continued to serve faithfully before him. As a result, the tribe continued to grow and prosper. Remember that the tribe of Manasseh became increasingly fruitful and was used more and more greatly by God as the years passed. Let's remember this. So let us all, like this tribe of Manasseh, let us not compare ourselves with others. Let us not. But instead, whether great or small, the blessings that God has given us, let us be thankful for it. Let us faithfully serve the Lord so that we can become the spiritual Manasseh and receive God's amazing blessings. Let it be so for all of us. I bless in the name of the Lord.